Keen readers of Weekly 50 might notice a resemblance, or at least a similar photo that was posted about a year ago. And here I've got another lightning photo. I rarely take these because I guess I just don't really have the opportunity to that often. We get rain in Oklahoma, we get storms sometimes, but I don't really have a good way to take these expansive photos of rain and or of lightning and these clouds rolling in. The geography here, or maybe it's where my house is located, it just isn't really, it's not a good spot for it, which is why I'm so glad I had my camera on our vacation in Kansas. It's much more, well, when I shot this, it was early June 2018, and I had my camera with me, as I always do when we go on our annual Kansas vacation, and there was, what night was it? This might have been Tuesday night, or no, maybe it was Monday night. This storm was kind of rolling in, and there was so much lightning right overhead that I wanted to get a picture of it. So I got my Fuji X100F. That was actually the only camera I brought on vacation. Well, okay, no. I did have my 70-200, my Nikon, plus that lens. But that was because I needed it for a separate event, and I just happened to have it with me. Other than that, I used my X100F on pretty much all of my vacation photos, and it was awesome. But we can talk about that another time. As far as this photo here goes, I had the X100F. I had a GorillaPod, and I figured it would be a good way to capture some lightning photos. And it sure was. Now the field of view on that is 35. It's the equivalent to a 35 millimeter lens on a full frame camera. So you don't get a super wide view, but wide enough to capture a decent wide shot, I guess. I don't even know if that makes sense. But normally for a lightning photo or something like this, you'd want a much wider lens to get a much broader field of view. But I didn't have a wider lens, so I just used what I had. I wrapped the legs of the GorillaPod around the railing of a porch, and I tried it in different spots. So I started by pointing the camera straight up, and I set the ISO to 200. I set the aperture probably like f11, I think. Set the focus to manual and just kind of guessed at the focus. The clouds are so far away that I figured it would just be in focus, and it was. So everything worked out. And I held the shutter button down, and I would just sit there and hold it down until lightning had struck a few times. And that's what you're seeing here. This is almost a minute-long exposure of me holding the shutter button down. And if the clouds look blurry on the left-hand side, that's because there were successive lightning strikes that illuminated the clouds in different spots as they moved. So lightning would strike, and it would briefly illuminate the clouds, and then they would go dark again. And then lightning would strike again, the clouds would have moved a little bit. So you get this blurry effect. It's kind of weird, but it works. And I really like how in the center bottom portion of the image, you have this, I called it Maelstrom because it looks like it's the center of this massive storm. In reality, it was just successive lightning strikes in some clouds over the course of a minute. So it looks more impressive than it was, but it's fun to do these long exposure lightning shots to capture a different perspective on things that you don't normally see. This is a whole minute's worth of light captured in one image. You also notice the trees in the bottom left. That was an intentional decision by me. After a little while, I decided that pointing my camera straight up at the sky might get me some decent lightning shots, but there was no context, so you couldn't tell how far away it was. It just didn't look right. There was nothing to ground the viewer in what was happening in the picture. But when I pointed it off to the more lower toward the horizon, I could get the trees in, and it made for a much more interesting picture.